the story's not, you don't want to create an experience for you or yourself, even though you're telling your own story or stories that relate to what you do. You want to create an experience that creates the emotions and the ideas and the feelings and answers the exact questions that your buyer needs to hear.
Welcome to the Magnificent Marketing Podcast, where we interview the top marketing experts in the world to keep you up to date on all the changes and best practices to help you grow your business and stay on the cutting edge. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. I am here today with Kyle Gray, and Kyle is the founder of The Story Engine, and he helps entrepreneurs create powerful storylines for their businesses that drive sales, growth, and engagement. He takes people through the scalable storytelling process, which is discover, finding the most interesting aspect of your story, define, getting clear on how we want that story to be shared, and delegate, building a creative team you can have help telling your story. And today we are going to be talking about selling with stories. How you doing today, Kyle?
I am so good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, David. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to talk with you about this. Selling with stories is talked about a ton, even stories within posts, even, mini stories, big stories. What's the story of your company? It's all over the place right now as far as the need to, sell and share with stories. But love to get your take on that. I'd like for you to kind of kick things off here with a kind of why businesses should incorporate storytelling or selling with stories?
Yeah. So to understand that, it's best to kind of take a look at what's been happening historically with technology in kind of the last 10 or 20 years. I mean, stories are an ancient thing. They're our oldest form of communication out there. But I think that, and they've always been important, but they've become even more important and even more relevant today. So all of us are really familiar with the technological changes that have been happening in the last 10 or 20 years. 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago, the iPhone came out. That changed everything. We've got all more connection than ever with social media, with online advertising. But we're also processing more information than ever. Back like 50 years ago, we would have to go to a library, to find whatever answers we were looking for and kind of search and slog through them. These days, information is almost infinite. And not only like information, but you can find information that proves any point that you want. Like there's this big flat earth movement happening right now where there's just compelling, YouTube videos out there that are presenting why the earth is flat. And they're like charismatic and engaging people and they've built up a big following. And so you can get any kind of information proving any idea you want online these days. And I think people are becoming very aware of that. So what's rare, since information now and ideas are so common, you can find any of those. What's rare right now is trust and a real human connection, because we can find any idea we want, but what we're really going to believe now is somebody that we know, that we feel we can relate to, and that we feel like they understand what we really want and what we're after, because we've, along with all this information and ideas, kind of our trust has eroded a bit. We don't trust people as easily. We've probably all fallen victim to some kind of, viral video or scam online, or, just something that just kind of like swept us away. And now we are a little more careful. And so by sharing your story, you don't only, you go far beyond your expertise, which I think expertise is really important. But in this day and age, being different and being authentic and building trust is much more important than being the best at anything. And
Yeah.
so by sharing your story, you can first of all, like, express yourself and who you are and what you care about and create a unique thing. But also a useful thing with storytelling is it gives you an opportunity to talk about what you do, who you serve, who you work with, and the results you get in a way that gets people to lean in and is engaging and interesting, as opposed to just saying like, just kind of an old sales tech, or like just saying like, this is my offer, you should buy this thing. Instead, you can like build in stories of what you do and who you are in an engaging way that keeps people from feeling defensive keeps people from feeling like, oh, I'm being sold to right now, I've got to be wary. And with stories, they kind of lean in. So long answer, but I hope that kind of encapsulates the big idea behind stories these days.
No, and I just want to, second that. Seemingly every conference we go to these days, they talk about everything that you mentioned as far as the shift towards audiences, the marketplace really wanting and fiending for authenticity, fiending for people to be real, companies to be real, companies to take a stand. And so, you're mentioning storytelling is a way to accomplish all those things, and we'll get into that. But, just looking at an overview, that's why storytelling, because it hits on all the hot buttons that's going in today's marketplace. And I really think that's just simply because people have gotten smarter. They've taken control of the buying situation. They used to be spoken to, and now they're the ones doing the speaking, and we're doing the listening on the business side. But why do you think, how did you come to this realization of this, storytelling and authenticity and all of it?
So it's been a part of me for quite a long time. And I almost rediscovered it rather than discovered it. I think 10 or so years back, I was convinced that the only way I was going to live a happy and fulfilled life was by being a songwriter or a musician. I spent long hours kind of crafting stories out of songs and creating emotional experiences and ideas and capturing those with good lyrics and good melodies. And it was something that I was really passionate about. I had this vision of just like creating, unique songs that changed people's minds and changed people how they thought about things. And, I'm sure most youngsters with a guitar think similar things, but I really found that same passion for, or that same outlet for creativity in creating good content, whether that is sales and copywriting for sales pages, or writing informative articles, or getting on a podcast and sharing who I am and what I'm doing. And by bringing in kind of the authentic elements of sharing who you were and what you were doing and being vulnerable in that, I've noticed a lot more of the results, and it just felt good and it felt natural to me, having created music before, which I think, is a very similar copywriting and writing good sales copy or telling good stories, selling your products is very similar to creating a song, where it's this emotional experience and it gives people something that they can step into and engage with and enjoy, and relate to. Mm-hmm. The songs that really stick with you, throughout your life are the ones where you feel like, oh man, they're speaking right to my soul. And you can that good storytelling creates that same effect. And so, gotcha. I love building that into what I do these days. And though I haven't become, a rock star, in the traditional sense, I think it's really fun and exciting to know that I am using my craft that I honed and developed when I was younger to live my life and make an impact.
Awesome. That's awesome. So, you seem like you have a really good handle on the storytelling aspect, but I believe this is a little bit sometimes harder, and it's easier said than done for companies to kind of tell their own story. Why do you think that is? And then after this, we'll jump into how people can accomplish this.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really difficult to tell your own story. I even find it difficult for myself. I have coaches and experts and branding people speak to me and give me feedback in the same way that I work with many of my clients. And I see a lot of value in that, even though I'm very skilled in this area. And I do that because I understand that it's hard to tell your own story, because, really in your own, when you're in your own world, what you think, and you experience is pretty normal. And the way you surround yourself with people. So I'm sure both of us have, a lot of friends on Facebook or Instagram or in real life that are talking about their big marketing initiatives, what they did, the big podcast launch, all these things. And it makes you think, like, because you're surrounded with this, you're kind of in that same bubble that people talk about politically. But it also happens, you get in a bubble with like who your friends are skill wise or what their professions are. And so I see a bunch of marketers on my Facebook feed, and they're all doing these amazing things. And it often leads to me to thinking, well, I do good content. I've got a podcast too, but what really unique thing do I have to offer? Mm-hmm. And it usually takes somebody else putting the pieces together for you to see the value, or at least you want to be able to use some certain frameworks to be able to take a step back and understand how the pieces fit together in somebody else's eyes. Because we honestly and unfortunately typically devalue ourselves and our own experiences and the value that we believe we can add to people. And so having somebody else, a fresh set of eyes that's trained in what to look for in a good story, and to apply that to the needs and desires of your audience, and then also tie that in with connect that to a product you're selling, and be able to apply those is really important. But really, I think the first step is being able to really get a foundational recognition of like who you are, what do you value, what makes you different, and how does that serve the needs of the people you want to serve.
Gotcha. So it sounds like, there's a process here that people need to go through. And so let's dig in there and have you go through that. I know you have, the different hero's journey, you have the buyer's journey. So, and then I believe you also kind of have a, 12 stages of, that break into this. And, in the spirit of only having so much time to talk about all this today, I'd love for you to kind of give as much of an overview of those that you should. And then I would love to leave our listeners with takeaway of how to kind of go through an exercise to get through this process, or go through your process, so that then they can start to identify what their compelling story might be. So I'll let you kind of take it from here. And again, talk about your heroes, your buyer's journey, and your stages. And let's see if we can't give somebody a good takeaway.
Definitely. So this process you're describing is called the Crossroads Formula. And in my studying of storytelling, what makes good characters, what makes a compelling and interesting story, I started researching a lot of different frameworks. And the most obvious and kind of most popular one is called the hero's journey, which is a 12-step framework for telling a good story. And all the stories that you're familiar with, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a movie or a book or whatever you really enjoy, they often follow this pattern of going through the stages of a story. And it's very common, but it's because it works and it makes sense. And it's just how we have evolved as social beings to interpret and process things. But what's interesting is I also noticed that there was a lot of parallels between the hero's journey, the storytelling framework, and the buyer's journey, which is a marketing and sales framework to understand the inner mindset of your audience and what it looks like for them to go from not having any idea you exist or have a product to wanting to buy the product to having bought the product and actually talking to other people about it. And so I'll give you a couple, and of course, before I dive into this framework, the most important step and the most important thing here is to really, really know your audience. I'm sure this is something that almost every guest, especially in marketing or sales, will say on your show. But you need to understand exactly the words and the experience and the feelings that the people you want to serve are experiencing, because in the story you're creating, your audience experiences the story as the hero. They are, as you are telling the story, they are imagining themselves in the hero's shoes. And so the story's not, you don't want to create an experience for you or yourself, even though you're telling your own story or stories that relate to what you do. You want to create an experience that creates the emotions and the ideas and the feelings and answers the exact questions that your buyer needs to hear. So we'll go into, let's go a quick overview of the buyer's journey, which has a couple of different stages: know, like, trust, and delight. So know is when they need to understand that you exist at all and that you solve a problem. And they also need to know, and a lot of people don't really recognize this one very much, that they have a problem. You know, a lot of times, say you're a yoga instructor and you're trying to sell online yoga classes, you know, there's somebody who doesn't know you exist but loves yoga. And then there's other people who have never tried yoga. It doesn't make any sense to them. You know, maybe they've never even heard of it. And the message that you send to these two different audiences, these two different people, it's going to be very different. And so you need to understand that element of it. Then there's like, and this is when they start to engage with you as a person. They see like, oh, this person's style's a little bit different. They're funny instead of just, you know, actionable all the time. Or I like, you know, the way their approach to solving a problem. And this is this is the stage where you really start to, where storytelling can be really powerful, creating a story about how you get your results, describing your process for getting results and describing why you're unique. And finally, there's trust. They know you solve a problem. They know they have that problem. They like you. They like the way that you solve problems a little bit differently, but they still need to trust that you can get results for them. And more importantly, and also something I think many people overlook, is they need to trust themselves to get the result. I think most people have that problem. They see you as an expert. They see you as somebody who's really, really powerful in this area. But if they don't believe that, okay, I too can get these results if I work with this person, then they're not going to move forward with you. So first of all, what you need to share, like case studies and and stories of customer success stories in here. But yeah, you need to empower people with your education to make them feel like, okay, I can get results, I can get wins. So let's dive into the Crossroads formula a little bit inside of this. So
are you wanting to share your screen?
No, I'm just pulling up the infographic I have, which I'll share with the audience. But I just wanted to give a couple of examples on here.
Okay.
So the first stage, like I said, we can go through the know phase, the very first phase of the buyer's journey, and we'll go through the first steps of the hero's journey. So in the Crossroads formula, I line up know with the first three steps of the hero's journey. So the first start of the hero's journey is status quo. The hero's there. Frodo Baggins is in the Shire. Harry Potter's in his cupboard. And things are pretty normal. And the Crossroads formula really it points out the question that your audience is asking themselves, most likely subliminally, about this. This is, in this part of the story, they're asking, is there a problem? Is there any conflict here? Why do I care? What's at stake? And so in opening your stories in this framework and format, you need to establish the scene. Who's here? What's going on? What's the problem? The next phase is the call to adventure. This is usually when there's some kind of problem, not all's well in the world, and the hero needs to has gotten an invitation to move forward. And sometimes it's not necessarily an invitation. Oftentimes it's it's like an invitation is kind of a nice thing. And usually what happens in most stories is something painful happens that forces them out of their comfort zone. But that's still technically an invitation. So this is the buyer's question that they're asking when you're telling this part of a story is this a problem I want to solve? You need to present them with something painful enough to get them to take action. You need to, in the story you're telling, your hero needs to have enough desire to leave their comfort zone and to start to find a solution. And this is the same thing your buyer's experiencing as they're getting to know you. They're saying, okay, well, with the yoga example, for some reason, I have a little bit of back pain and I don't feel as calm or energetic as I used to. And so is this a problem I want to solve? Yeah, I think I do. And finally, assistance. And this one's an important step because this is really where you are putting yourself in the story. This is where your hero meets their guide. And in the buyer's question, they're asking, where can I learn more about this problem? So this is in classic stories. This is when for back to Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter is like Hagrid or the giant or Gandalf shows up and says, hey, you need to go on a big adventure. So that's actually who you are. You are going to be Gandalf, kind of inviting your audience onto an adventure with you. It's going to be risky. They're going to have to invest money. They're probably going to be out of their comfort zone no matter what problem you solve for them. They're going to have to take some chances and change their behaviors and get out of their comfort zone. So they're experiencing all these same things that your hero's doing. And so through the process of storytelling, you're actually preparing them to work with you. And this whole the Crossroads Formula goes throughout the entire hero's journey and has good buyer questions for each one of these. And another useful thing about this framework is you can imagine where your audience is in their own personal buyer's journey with you. Maybe they know a lot about you. Maybe they're about ready to pull the trigger, but they're just kind of like they're wavering or they're faltering a little bit. So you can tell them a story a little bit later on, again, that answers their question, such as like, what does it cost me if I don't solve this problem? What's really at stake here? And you can tell them a story saying, about maybe one day, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be this huge, epic adventure like Lord of the Rings or you jumping out of a burning building, saving a baby or anything like that. In fact, usually the simple stories and relatable stories are better. So if somebody's asking like, what does it cost me if I don't solve this problem, if I don't take this action right now, which is a little bit later on in the Crossroads Formula, then you can tell a story about, well, there was this time where I really wanted to take action. I made my New Year's resolution and I really wanted to lose those 10 pounds in the gym, but I didn't take action right away. I decided, what's a few more months? And then I realized, by March or whatever, that I had totally let myself down and finally went to the gym, was feeling good. And by the summertime, I was feeling pretty good. But then I looked back and remembered, I had just wasted those 3 months. It didn't it didn't help me that much. So I learned that I just need to take action and get started right now. And that, even though it's a simple story, can get people feeling and experiencing and relating to the emotions and the ideas that inspire the actions that you'd like them to take in moving forward with you.
All right. I know you have some more steps here, but I definitely want to. I've heard so much about selling with stories and how people relate to it. It's like a cognitive deal. I would love for you to help everybody understand, because we keep hearing you could use a story here or you could use a story there. Like let's dig into that a bit here and say, like, what do you mean exactly by that? Like, relating, into like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, definitely get the hero's journey. You have somebody who had needs, here they are, no problem yet. Okay, here comes the problem. Here's how they overcame the problem, or they might not make it, and then they do, and then it's amazing, and here it is, right?
Yeah.
Trying to tie that back to real world people, because you might have law firms listening to this. You could have B2B salespeople with selling technology. You could have, obviously a fitness trainer, which, might even, have a better idea how to do this. But like, how can we help them tell a story? Because it sounds like we're not just talking about their overall story, like their journey. It's like stories within the buyer's journey, stories within different stages of it, where they can interject different pieces of content that are more story format. So can you talk like specifically about that versus, I feel like we've been a little bit high level right now, and I'd like to kind of dig in and give like a takeaway, like, okay, everybody, hopefully we've, sold you on the fact that people love to listen this way, love to communicate or read or be on the receiving end. But how can we help the companies and the marketers out there create a story in specifics, not just a company story, but within like, capturing somebody when they're mid-funnel down the buyer's journey?
Yeah, that's a great example. Capturing somebody mid-funnel in the buyer's journey. Let's talk about, I'm sure people would like use a lot of webinars in your audience, for example. And so let's think about how we could apply this specifically to a webinar. So a webinar is about 60 minutes long, and usually to open, to kind of engage people, you want to tell them kind of a full story. And this is when using the Crossroads Formula is a great place to use the whole process. So you follow kind of the whole hero's journey. You talk about, again, how you discovered the solution to this problem, and really achieving some basic goals in the opening story, which are things that you really want to do in the first 5 minutes. You want to share why you are ordinary, why you connect with the audience so that they can relate to you and feel like you understand them. But you also want to share why you're extraordinary. And this helps you show your audience that though you can relate to their challenges, they also see that you have overcome the problem and that you understand things better than they do, and you've got something that they want. And finally, why do you care? Why do you care about this problem in particular? Because they want somebody that actually, is invested in solving this problem and really cares. And that's a big trust builder. So that's what the opening story can look like. But
let's touch on that. Let's give an example. Can you like give do you have any real life examples that, because I think that it's, at least for me, how I can understand stuff, because again, we're giving theoretical stuff, but it's like when you give an example, people are like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Perfect. So I work with health and wellness practitioners primarily. I love to work with people who are kind of in alternative medicine fields. So acupuncture, chiropractic, gut health coaches, things that aren't covered under insurance, but make a big impact. And the reason I love to work with those people is because about 5 years ago, and still to this day, I was suffering profoundly from an autoimmune disease that I didn't really recognize was an autoimmune disease. It was something called Hashimoto's, which is when your system's attacking your thyroid. But for me, how I was experiencing it, I was experiencing extreme joint pain, a lot of fatigue, a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know what was wrong. Every time my jaw was kind of like clenching and grinding at night, and I would wake up in the morning just totally filled with anxiety. And when I didn't understand like that it was just my health that was the problem, I would fill in the gaps with other stories. And so I spent a long time, many years, kind of researching how health and what was going on there. And I ended up about a year ago encountering a doctor who works in gut health and overcomes chronic autoimmune conditions. And sitting across from her at a lunch table, everything that I started to learn about copywriting and storytelling started to connect with everything I knew about health and working with these kind of health problems. So I offered to work with her, and also became a customer of hers. And so within 3 months, the anxiety, all of these things that I had been experiencing for such a long time really started to fade away with some diet and lifestyle changes. But it was a totally world-changing thing for me. My quality of life improved dramatically. And so it was then that I realized how important that what these doctors and health professionals is that they are doing, and the value that it brings to my life. And it also, I understand the value that they can add, and I understand their challenge. They work a lot like business consultants or high-end consultants, but because they usually have to charge a lot for their services, and they're not covered under insurance, but they don't have the sophistication of most high-end business consultants as far as marketing and sales goes. So applying these same ideas that I've been working with startups and entrepreneurs and small businesses with directly to these doctors was a really powerful opportunity for me. And since I understood the value as someone who'd experienced it from a disease standpoint, where most of the marketers out there experienced it from being a clinician themselves. So I brought a unique perspective and a unique skill set to this marketplace that's fairly rare. And though I would say, like, there's many other storytellers out there, there's many other copywriters and marketing consultants, but the unique value from my experience and my story makes me very powerful in this particular marketplace.
Yes, appreciate you sharing that. Absolutely. To kind of circle back, though, would love to, again, how are they using? So how can we see a real life story? Obviously for like a business, to apply like a story format, selling with stories. Like so hearing everything there, how does that apply to these practitioners? Like, what are they doing to sell with stories? Like, how are you helping them sell with stories?
Yeah. So the story I just told you was a fairly condensed version of actually the opening story of a talk that I give. And I gave just a couple of weeks ago at a microbiome medicine conference in San Francisco. And so as I'm sharing my experience with my health, I also understand my audience, like I was saying, and I understand that most of the people in this room got into these types of medicine and healing because they also had experienced something. So by sharing my experience with health, I'm creating some relation to them. But then by connecting that with saying, I also started to understand how to apply my skills as a marketer, as a storyteller to their specific problem. I brought in the element of ordinary and extraordinary. Okay, somebody understands how it feels to be suffering with this health condition, but they also understand how I can share my story and use and connect with people, because a lot of these doctors, their problem, again, knowing your audience, their biggest problem is they're so smart, and they often will default to their really smart, intelligent medical jargon language when when working with patients and trying to market to their patients, and it often just turns them off. So having somebody that, again, knows who they are and the value that they add, and can put it into the words that their audience experiences, what I experienced, what they experienced before they became who they are today, that's really valuable. And it also shows why I care so much, because I personally benefited so much from these types of medicine. I see how important it is in the world. And so applying it like that, and that would be again, out of a 20-minute talk, the first 5 minutes. And then I would go in and start sharing my process. And this is the same thing that you can do on a webinar, on any kind of content you're creating. There's lots of different ways to apply this. But then I would go into saying, okay, well, I have a process, a proprietary process, which I would teach around. And so a proprietary process this is again, a very actionable, useful tool. It's just being able to create kind of a secret recipe for how you get the results you get for your audience. And so I like them to be 3 to 5 steps, built around a metaphor or a recipe or something that shows how you get results. So for me, I have the one clear path to sales. And so step 1, we create one clear message. We get clear on your story and how your audience is going to hear it. Then next is one clear lesson. We educate them and empower them with good information that allows them to feel like they're winning and moving forward. And finally, one clear offer. Once we present them with an offer to move forward with us after educating them, and that's aligned with their story and their desire. And so I taught on each of these different points a little bit. And so throughout this, I was also telling stories of previous clients I worked with. And this is called embedding. So you can say, well, I worked with this doctor previously, and she was experiencing these problems with her marketing. And so I applied my process and did these things to, we created more email automation as far as her store went to increase people buying more of her supplements and products, which created this result. And so instead of talking about like, here's my process and here's what I do with doctors, I kind of encapsulated it in a story of me helping somebody and built education around it. So I'm talking about what I do and how I work with people, but it's not just trying to be salesy and say, sign up for my whatever program, or purchase my product. I'm saying I've helped people in this way, and this is what you can learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, how do you see video playing a part in this day and age for this? Seems like it's a perfect format for selling with stories.
I think so. There's a lot of powerful things. I think there's definitely room for stories in all forms. I think writing though is not as it's not as flashy as anything as video or audio, but it's still definitely, I think, the foundation. Audio is great. Like podcasts, you can have powerful found time where somebody can listen to a podcast while driving or working out or something like that. Something that they can't do with video or writing. But video is really powerful because it combines it's just a so much more complete experience. They get to see you. You get to use visuals, and the brain processes visuals faster and at a deeper level than language. We developed our sight and our sight processing long but we developed any kind of language capacity. And so being able to show visuals, not just of you, but it's important to show you and your experience and your facial expressions and your movement, which are all very subtle. And some people argue that 80% of communication isn't even the words you choose, but it's the tone of the words you choose and the body language that you encapsulate with that, which video does a great job in showing. But you can also use visual storytelling. So if you're talking about your own story and splicing in videos of you maybe traveling, maybe learning about the problem that you solve, maybe engaging with your ideal customers, and creating these kind of subtle images and messages, weaving them in with what you're actually saying and what you're actually doing, can create a much more valuable experience. But another thing that I want to say about video is a lot of people, I think, overthink video. A nice thing about it is it's really, really accessible to everybody today. If you've got a somewhat decent smartphone of any kind, you can record a video of yourself. If you just getting started, like just throw up a few videos on Instagram, talk about who you are, what you're doing. And I think a really important thing to do here in video is not just teach, but I think teaching should be the foundation of all of what you're doing. But share, it's also like good on video or on podcast or just whenever you're telling stories, share a little bit of who you are, what you care about. Maybe you are, a solar sales executive, but on the weekends, you love mountain biking. And so actually by like bringing in some of your unique elements about, yes, I love mountain biking, it's taking a video of you on a bike ride talking about solar sales, you're going to start to resonate and connect with people.
That's
on a
the
little
authenticity
bit
part.
It's the authenticity.
At the beginning, people are fiending for that.
Yeah.
The world's fiending for it, just in general.
Yeah.
Forget about marketing and business and sales. People are just fiending for people to be real. And I don't know if it's part of the political landscape that we're in right now, but it's I'm telling you, man, it's bigger than ever, and it's only going to become more and more, especially with millennials and the next generation Zs, they're all like requiring it,
I think so.
Absolutely.
And it brings me to maybe one really good point to kind of put a cap on all of this. And when you're telling your story, whether you're speaking from a stage, whether you're giving a webinar, whether you're just on social media, the stories that really work for people, that really create the results that you want, are typically not the stories like I was diving with sharks in, South Africa, or I was in low Earth orbit, looking at that. But it's really the small, relatable stories, like what we were just talking about with mountain biking. You want somebody after you speak not to come up to you and say, wow, that was an amazing story, I've never heard anything like that. You want them to come up to you and say, hey, I experienced that too. I understand what that is. And that's the connection. That's the authenticity. And that's what it gets people to feel like they know you and they understand you. And that's why, I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast for just one example of many things. And, probably if I saw him, and I'm sure he experiences this all the time, but like people will probably come up to him and they feel like they know him because they've been listening to him speak, listening to him tell stories for so long that they feel like they have this relationship with him. And that's the same thing when you can create this effect, whether you're just doing little Instagram stories. And again, you don't have to like teach, the whole time, but like give them a useful lesson that shows who you are and why you're a little bit different. And it'll create that same effect.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, I think we're about out of time. I really appreciate it. How can people continue to learn from you and where they can, in a podcast of this time frame, it's hard to get into all the details of, the 12-step process and everything. So love for you to let everybody know how they can continue to learn from you and learn more about this particular topic in the Crossroads that you speak of.
Yeah, so I'll definitely share a link directly to the Crossroads article that I have. And I have a really awesome infographic that shows kind of how all these things fit together and gives you, it's really beautiful, done by a designer named June Bui, who totally phenomenal. So I recommend that. I also have a book called The Story Engine, which helps you define your story and who you are, and then create a scalable marketing system to create or to share more of that story. And I should have another book titled Selling with Story coming out within the next few months. I think last time we talked, I promised it a little bit earlier. This one is like really, sometimes just on that last portion of books, it's just a real struggle to get it just so. But anyway, but you can follow me at thestoryengine.co. That's where I've got my blog articles, lots of amazing articles, like a quiz that you could take to figure out how to start telling your story with content. And I've got a podcast that I've launched on there recently. We have 18 episodes recently. We had my first video episode, speaking of video, with Dr. Chris Zano, who has a really incredible story. So if you want to see an amazing storyteller in action and see the power of what video can do, highly recommend that episode. So that's how you can you can connect and learn more from me. And I would love anybody to reach out and let me know what they thought, or if you have any questions.
Okay, awesome. Well, appreciate it, Kyle. And I think we all need to get better at selling with stories. And hopefully we all have gotten a little bit better after listening to this today. All right, man. Until next time. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for listening to the latest podcast. Feel free to go to magnificent.com/blog to see the show notes for this interview, as well as those from many other of the world's top marketing experts. Have a great day.